The Silent Woods. In a small, forgotten town surrounded by dense woods, there was a legend about Evelyn Hart, a young widow who lived on the edge of the forest. She was known for her kindness and her beautiful voice, often heard singing lullabies to her baby boy, Thomas. But one stormy night, tragedy struck. Thomas vanished from his crib, leaving behind only a faint trail of tiny footprints leading into the woods. Desperate, Evelyn searched for him tirelessly. The townsfolk warned her that the forest was cursed, but she didn't care. Lantern in hand, she ventured into the darkness, calling her son's name. Days turned into weeks, and when Evelyn didn't return, people assumed she had perished. But then the stories began. Some claimed to hear her lullaby drifting on the wind at night. Others swore they saw her lantern glowing deep within the trees. Over time, the legend grew. Evelyn hadn't died. She had become part of the forest, cursed to wander in search of her lost child. Decades later, the forest had become a forbidden place. Locals shared whispered warnings about Evelyn's woods, but for a group of thrill-seeking teenagers, it was the perfect spot for a dare. Armed with flashlights, a camera, and bravado, they ignored the warnings and entered the forest just as the sun dipped below the horizon. At first, the woods seemed ordinary, though eerily silent. No birds, no rustling leaves, just an oppressive stillness. As they ventured deeper, the air grew colder, and the trees seemed to close in. "Guys, I think we should turn back," said Mia, the youngest of the group. "Don't be a baby," scoffed Jake, the self-proclaimed leader. "There's nothing here, just stupid old stories." But then they heard it, a soft, melodic humming. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "What the hell is that?" whispered Sam, his voice shaking. The group followed the sound, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. That's when they saw her. Evelyn stood motionless between the trees, her tattered white dress glowing faintly in the moonlight. Her face was obscured by shadows, but her hands clutched a lantern, its flickering light casting eerie patterns on the ground. "Hello?" Jake called out, his bravado faltering. Evelyn turned her head slowly, the humming growing louder. Her voice was beautiful yet haunting, each note laced with sorrow. "She's not real," Jake muttered, stepping closer. "It's just a trick." Before he could finish, Evelyn raised her lantern. The flame inside flared brightly, blinding them. When the light dimmed, she was gone, but so was the path they had come from. Panic set in as the forest seemed to shift around them. The trees grew taller, their twisted branches forming a labyrinth. The humming grew louder, now joined by faint whispers. "Did you hear that?" Mia asked, clutching Sam's arm. "It's saying our names," he replied, his voice barely audible. The whispers grew into a cacophony, drowning out their terrified screams. One by one, the group began to vanish. Jake was the first. He strayed too far from the others, and when they turned to look for him, all they found was his flashlight, flickering weakly on the ground. Nia was next. She froze in place, her eyes wide with terror. "She's here," she whispered before disappearing into the shadows. Only Sam made it out. He stumbled into town at dawn, his clothes torn and his face pale as death. When the townsfolk asked what happened, he could only mutter, "She wasn't looking for her child. She was looking for us." Years later, an old diary was discovered in the ruins of Evelyn's cottage. Its pages revealed the truth. Thomas hadn't wandered into the woods. He had been taken by a group of townsfolk who believed his birth had brought the curse upon the village. They left him deep in the forest as an offering, hoping to appease whatever dark force dwelled there. When Evelyn learned the truth, her grief turned to rage. She cursed the townsfolk, vowing that the forest would never let their descendants rest. Her spirit merged with the woods and she became its guardian, a mother eternally searching for her child, punishing anyone who dared to enter. The camera pans over the forest, its twisted branches shrouded in mist. In the distance, a faint light flickers. Evelyn's lantern. Her humming drifts through the air, growing louder as the screen fades to black. She's still searching.